Hi, this is the next module for assessment of students. In this module, we're going to talk about creating constructed response test questions, checklists, rating scales, and rubrics. At the end of this module, you should be able to create constructed response questions, know the advantages and disadvantages of them, and be able to identify usable rubrics. Constructed response questions. Those are your essay questions, your problem-solving questions, and your performance test questions. Performance test we'll look at in the next module, but this one will just focus on essay and problem solving. So essay questions. Easy to create. It's just a prompt. Explain the process of photosynthesis. That's an easy way to create a test question or an essay question. What are the advantages? They're easy to construct. You minimize guessing because you cannot pick something and guess the correct answer. And they measure your higher cognitive objectives. It's on the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy because I'm actually creating something and I'm having to use the information and put it together. The disadvantages, they take more time to grade because you've got to do a lot more reading. You can't put that in a machine for a machine to grade them. And there's low reliability. Remember that reliability just means you're going to get the same answer again and again. That doesn't make it a bad thing. You just need to know there's low reliability and it is subject to greater bias. So this gets into having a good rubric attached to your essay so that you reduce any greater bias. Problem-solving questions. Problem solving has to do with math usually, science maybe as well. Sally has 10 apples. She gave 3 apples to a friend. She dropped 1 apple. How many apples does Sally have left? Show your work. And obviously the equation on the right does not match my example of Sally and her apples, but you get the point. So a problem-solving question. The advantage, again, you minimize guessing because you cannot, you can guess, but the odds of you guessing and getting it correct are very low. They're easier to construct than some of your others as far as matching and multiple choice. The disadvantages, again, they take more time to grade and they could be subject to greater bias if you give partial credit. So again, this question will be part of your grading. So take a minute and think through it. What is an advantage of constructed response questions? They're hard to create. They take more time to grade. They're highly reliable. They minimize guessing. What is an advantage? And then what is a disadvantage for constructed response questions? They're hard to create. They take more time to grade. They're highly reliable. They minimize guessing. What is a disadvantage? And then let's go into checklists, rating scales, and rubrics. So how do you score a essay or a problem-solving question? You better have some sort of rubric, checklist, or rating scale to use to reduce greater bias. So what's the difference between the three? They're all, I think, just a little bit more specific. So your checklist is your more general in that I'm just doing a quick glance and they get a check. Yes or no, did they do it? So I'm looking at an essay and can I see that there's a clear thesis with 3 reasons in the introduction? I'm not being very specific. I'm just giving it a glance. Do I see 3 body paragraphs? Do I see a conclusion paragraph? And I'm just giving them a check. They did it or they didn't do it. The next step gets a little bit more specific. Now I'm going to look at a rating scale, and now I'm going to give a points associated with it. Okay, I see an introduction, but looking at it, I can see that it only has 2 sentences instead of at least 3 to 5. So I give it a 3. I can see that instead of 3 body paragraphs, there's only 1. So I give it a 1. I can see the closing. It's still very general, and it can still be very subject to greater bias in that I'm not consistently doing the same thing and I'm not looking at some explanation of why I'm doing what I'm doing. The most specific is going to be your rubric because your rubric has specific indicators. There's specific criteria that I'm looking at, and there's also a rating scale. So a rubric is a guide that's used to evaluate the performance of a product or a project. So the rubric should be specific. There should be 3 things on it at least. The performance criteria, which is usually found on the left as far as neatness, presentation, opening paragraph, closing paragraph, body paragraphs. There's a rating scale, usually from, sometimes people do it in 3 categories. Sometimes people do it in 5 categories. That varies. And then your indicators. Your indicators should be very specific. I could not find an example of one, but this one is not very specific. The mind map was not neat enough to understand. Well, neat enough according to who? The mind map was not neat enough to understand most concepts. I don't like that. I think it should be a little bit more specific as far as the mind map had 3 of the 5, categories for this. And that's why I gave it a 3, because it had 3 of the 5. It only had 2 of the 5, so I gave it a 2. It only had 1 of the 5, that's why I gave it a 1. So the rubric, the more specific the rubric is, the easier it is to make sure that you're not being biased in your grading, and for your students to see very specific feedback as to why they got the grade that they got, and something they could also use in peer evaluations as well. And if you have any questions, you know how to do it. You can post them on the discussion board, come to the office hours, or send me an email. Until next time, take care.